move away.
Yeah, Felicia, yesterday I was telling you about the walkway over the Hudson, that railroad bridge that they transformed into a pedestrian bridge. I'm wondering if it's going to stay open because they do shut it down if the winds reach a certain point. So it could be a little dangerous up there.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be up there in this weather or the wind that we're going to have.
It's going to be slippery just on the steps leading up to it, so I wouldn't do it today. All right, Felicia, thanks so much. Let's talk about the other aspect to the wind, interacting with the water, and then, of course, the threat for some coastal flooding. So we do have issues, especially over New England. We've got a coastal flood advisory, and even parts of Long Island Sound, southern Connecticut, the northern parts of Long Island around Jericho. We could see some flooding due to that persistent wind coming in off the Atlantic. So as we check on the gauges for now, most of them are in minor flood. You've got the Jersey Shore stretching down toward the Delmarva Peninsula, the very southern parts of Maryland, and even eastern parts of Delaware. And they could go up a little bit more, especially at times of high tide. It all has to do with that wind direction, carrying that water onshore. And you can see the forecast for those gauges right around the Boston area. They are expected to rise to at least minor flood stage. So as we check on some of the gauges, in particular here around the Potomac and the Chesapeake Bay, the D.C. area, the high tide cycle 133 this afternoon, another one coming through tomorrow afternoon. And yes, we will still be dealing with this system tomorrow. Even after the rain and snow is over, we're still going to have those very gusty winds. For Boston, it's going to be more like a northeast wind, gusting as high as 40, 50 miles an hour. We've got high wind warnings in effect along the eastern side of Massachusetts. So that's going to push the water in about 1 to 2 feet above normally dry ground, especially at times of high tide, which for tomorrow morning is at 5:27 and then again at 6:14 in the evening. And yes, we will go through both of those high tide cycles and experience some of that flooding, with that coastal wind coming on shore. All right, so Jordan, we got a lot of hazards when it comes to the system.
Yeah, we do.
And we've got cold air coming in behind the system, and it's not just affecting the north. We've got cold air sinking south as well. We've got freeze warnings in effect for a huge chunk of the south, from Arkansas to the Carolinas, even in North Georgia. Some of you may have started your spring planting, hopefully not, because you'll need to cover it up and bring it inside. Not just tonight, but tomorrow night gets really cold as well. Currently, we've got the numbers in the upper 20s in Huntsville. Keep in mind, right in Atlanta, it's 32 degrees, but I'm sure outside areas like Kennesaw, Marietta, New York, and the Mid-Hudson Valley. I was just checking with my nieces and nephews. They have a snow day in Poughkeepsie. Schools are all shut down. Hopefully, they don't lose the power, though. That's no fun, right, when you have a snow day. We got the snow coming down from the Berkshires back to the Worcester Hills. Still waiting on that snow in Boston and Providence and even Hartford. We've been going back and forth between the rain and the snow, and some of you are getting pretty heavy rain mixed with sleet. But the snowfall totals are mounting here. You've got, half a foot of snow in some of these areas in the Berkshires. In fact, closing in on a foot of snow in northern Berkshire County. Power outages are showing that's the hardest hit area so far this morning across Massachusetts. You've also got over into the Hudson Valley, lots of power outages this morning, and that number continues to rise. We're talking about another foot of snow on the way for places like Worcester. A little bit less as you head down the Connecticut River Valley, Springfield, maybe 3 to 5. Berkshires, we are still in it throughout the day today, and even overnight, the winds are going to continue to crank as that rain changes over to snow. We've got high wind warnings in effect for Boston, down toward the Cape, winds gusting as high as 50 or 60 miles an hour. And there's your blue filling in across the Bay State here. That is all snow, and then it begins to taper off by tomorrow. But Steph, the wind remains and the cold remains behind it as well.
Yes, this nor'easter is
finally show up mid-March on the anniversary of the storm of the century, right back in '93. But this just in, Felicia, I found out my nieces and nephews did get the day off from school today, so they are very excited to be able to get out there and play in the snow, as long as the power doesn't go out.
Yeah, Poughkeepsie School District saying they were closed yesterday evening. I wasn't sure if your nieces and nephews went to school here or not, so when you said that, I was like, I'm not sure where they are. But and then, of course, there was a travel advisory from the government this morning as well. So people hunkering down, really taking it seriously, and we love to see it.
Yeah, I was checking schools, not just in Poughkeepsie, but just outside of there, the Arlington district as well. So great news for the kids. Not so great if you have to travel. Felicia, we'll get back to you. You mentioned the winds. The winds are also interacting with the ocean water. So we are concerned about coastal flooding. We have coastal flood advisories in effect for parts of the New England coastline, stretching from about Portland, Maine, all the way down through Boston and beyond, down toward the Cape. You've got the east end of Long Island, although some of these coastal advisories have been taken down across the Long Island Sound. So that's the good news. We've also been keeping a close eye on the gauges closer to the D.C. area. Across the Delmarva Peninsula, we're dealing with minor to even moderate flooding right now. These are the gauges now And this is the forecast right here. You can see mainly minor flooding along the east end of the Chesapeake and, of course, across New England, the east end of Massachusetts. We're calling for mainly minor flooding, so about 1 to 2 feet above normally dry ground, and especially at times of high tide. Now, for your high tide in the D.C. area, the Potomac and Chesapeake, we're talking about 1:30 this afternoon, and then another high tide coming in early tomorrow morning. Keeping an eye on Boston for you guys, it's more of a northeasterly wind, and it will be very persistent. So that's going to push that water up along the shoreline where coastal flood advisories are in effect. Seas are coming up at about 5:27 in the morning tomorrow for high tide, and another high tide cycle tomorrow evening, Jordan, because that wind is still going to be with us even during the day tomorrow.
Yeah, even